The sky was an endless, blinding blue over California's Los Padres National Forest, the horizon stretching like a wild canvas against the calm. Alone in the cockpit of his small, aging plane, Trevor D. Jacob glanced at his reflection in the glass. His own eyes stared back, nervous, almost unsure. His hands were tense on the controls, heart racing faster than the beat of the engine. For Trevor, this wasn't just another flight. It was an all-or-nothing leap into fame. For weeks, he'd planned each detail. The cameras angled just so, the parachute strapped tight to his back, the selfie stick clutched in his hand. He took a breath, steadying himself. This was it, the moment that could bring everything he'd wanted. Millions of views, fame, admiration. He'd be remembered. But there was a cost, and somewhere, deep inside, he knew it. The scheme takes flight. With every mile, his anticipation grew, and so did the fear. What if something went wrong? What if he got caught? He pushed the thoughts away, focusing on the plan. 35 minutes into the flight, he looked into the camera with what he hoped was the right mix of fear and excitement. His voice trembled, even if his intentions didn't. He took one last breath, and with the twist of his hand, he opened the door, plunging into the open sky. The wind screamed past him as he parachuted down, his heart pounding, adrenaline flooding his veins. Behind him, his plane, his loyal, precious plane, spiraled down, alone, disappearing in a plume of dust and shattered metal far below. When he landed, he felt the thrill, the rush of having pulled it off. He hiked through the wilderness, recording each grueling step for the camera, giving his audience the story they'd crave, the hero's journey through a harsh, unforgiving landscape. "I'm just so happy to be alive," he whispered to the camera, feigning relief and barely containing a grin. But the thrill was short-lived. As his video went viral, the rush of fame turned sour. The comments were suspicious. Aviation experts dissected each second, calling him out for the staged angles, the improbability of a parachute. The act was starting to crack. Panic tightened its grip as he realized just how deep he was in. The cover-up. When federal investigators called, the panic became real fear. They wanted the wreckage preserved, every scrap of twisted metal. They saw through the story he'd so carefully crafted. He was caught between the shame of failure and the sinking dread of the law closing in. 2 days after the crash, he returned to the wreckage, desperation gnawing at him. In the quiet of the forest, under a canopy of trees, he worked quickly, yanking and pulling each piece, hauling it back with the help of a friend. By nightfall, he had the wreck stashed away, hidden. But the guilt remained, a dark shadow he couldn't shake. Piece by piece, he chopped up the plane, his hands aching, his breath short. He stuffed each fragment into trash bins, the weight of his actions pressing heavier with each piece he discarded. He told himself it was over, that he'd gotten away with it, but he could feel it wasn't. The courtroom reckoning. In the hushed silence of the courtroom, Trevor sat alone. There was no camera this time, no audience to thrill, just the unwavering gaze of Judge John F. Walter. Every eye in that room was on him. His hands, which had once controlled the wheel with such confidence, now lay limp in his lap. Judge Walter's voice was steady, sharp. "This type of daredevil conduct cannot be tolerated," he said, each word cutting deeper than Trevor's worst fears. Trevor's voice barely held as he whispered, "This experience has been humbling." He could feel the judgment from every direction, the weight of his mistakes bearing down on him like a lead weight. 6 months. The sentence hit him with a finality that took his breath away. His dreams of fame had shattered into something cold and unyielding, a punishment he couldn't outrun. There would be no escaping this, no more acting, no more stunts, just the long, slow reckoning with what he'd done. Resolution. As he waited to begin his sentence, Trevor recorded one final message, a quiet, almost broken confession. It was supposed to be just an adventure, he said, voice barely above a whisper, but it became something else. His words faltered, a single tear slipping down his cheek as he finally let himself feel the weight of everything he'd lost. This was the end of Trevor's story, as he knew it. No cameras, no audience, no escape. Just the cold realization of what he'd sacrificed in his relentless pursuit of fame. For those who watched, his story became more than just a scandal. It was a tragic reminder of how far someone might fall, chasing a dream, losing sight of everything else in its shadow.